The programs that we've created so far are about as basic as a C program can possibly be. Read a little bit of text in from the keyboard and print some text out onto the screen. And that's about all. Chapter 3 looks into what we call some of the basic elements of a C program. There are no advanced topics here, just simple things that it's necessary for just about every programming language to support. And let's look at what the topic list is for this chapter. We need to talk about whitespace. You, the programmer, get to control how much whitespace you put into each .c file that you create. When I say whitespace, I'm talking about spaces, tabs, and carriage returns. When we get to that little module, I'll explain why this is an issue. Next, we need to look at data types. We've only looked at one data type so far, and that's the int data type. We'll look at all the rest of the data types that C has to offer. We'll also look at strings. Strings are, well, they're sort of a data type. They're not exactly a real proper data type, but we think of them as a data type. So we'll be having a look at those. Arithmetic operators. Now, what I'm talking about here are plus, minus, multiply, divide, and any others that C might have to offer. We're going to be able to do arithmetic operations on numbers. And comments. Comments are pieces of text that's readable text by you, not C code, English text or whatever language you happen to speak, that are inserted into your code to make it more understandable by you and anybody else that's reading the source code. Finally, we'll look at printf and scanf. We've had brief looks at them so far. We'll examine that these two functions are actually quite useful and quite powerful, more than they would immediately appear. So, without further ado, let's have a look at the first of these elements, whitespace. Let's examine a simple piece of C code and I'll show you the whitespace issues surrounding that code. Here is our old favourite Hello World program again. Now, my question to you is there any whitespace in this program already? And the answer is yes, there is. There's some obvious whitespace just here. There's actually 4 spaces at the beginning of that line, and there's 4 more spaces at the beginning of that line. Is that all? No, that's not all. There's also a carriage return on the end of every line. There, 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 and possibly there as well. Is that all? Well, yes and no. There is actually a space just here. But that space is somewhat special. That space is sitting inside a string literal. A string literal is anything inside double quotes. In other words, it's this red text right here. Whitespace inside string literals is treated differently to whitespace outside of string literals. The whitespace within the string literal, in other words the space between the word hello and the word world, is exactly the amount of whitespace that I want to appear on the screen. When this program prints its output, it'll print the word hello followed by exactly 1 space followed by the word world. And so, because that's the way I want the output to appear, that's the way I have to code it inside the string literal. So that whitespace inside the string literal is very exact, very precise, and I don't have any latitude to change it. However, the whitespace in the rest of the C source code is different. And here is the rule involved. When a piece of C source code is compiled, the compiler completely ignores all whitespace. And I'm talking about all spaces, and I'm talking about all carriage returns, and I'm also talking about all tabs, if you have any tab characters in your code. I'm going to prove this to you now by rewriting this source code. Let me show you this source code rewritten in a form where all this whitespace has been removed. Let's have a look at that now. Okay, and here it is. As you can see, it's all on one line. This is valid C code. I allege that this will compile and run and produce exactly the same output as it produced before. Let's see if that is correct. I'll compile. Significantly, no errors. I'll also now run the program. I get hello world. So, it is exactly what I said it would be. I'll now rewrite the program again, and this time I will add unnecessary whitespace. I'll add whitespace where I just don't need it, and the program will look rather odd when I've completed. Let's do that now. Okay, now it really does look odd this time. I've basically broken up everything that's possible to be broken up. Brackets have been separated, everything's, well, there's no separation there, but I just put that in to show you that you can leave things unseparated. The program is a mess, but it is in exactly the same order as it was before. All that I've done is add whitespace. I've added some tabs, and I've added some spaces and carriage returns. Let's have a look and see if that compiles. Compiles perfectly, total error is 0, just as before. It runs perfectly as well. I'll now just put the program back to the way it was originally, and here we are back at square one. So, I've obviously put some whitespace into this particular program, and if you have looked at the previous programs that I've shown you, you'll see that I've put very similar whitespace into them. Why have I chosen this particular combination of whitespace? Specifically, why have I put 4 spaces here, and a carriage return after every line? For that matter, what constitutes a line? Why have I put a carriage return after that bracket, but I haven't put a carriage return after that bracket? I've put a semicolon after it and then a carriage return after that. Well, this is just known as good C conventional style. Everything between 2 semicolons is known as a statement, so that is one statement with the semicolon at the end to delimit the statement. And convention has it that you put one statement on one line. And there's more to it than that, because there's no semicolon on the end of that line, but we still have it on a line by itself. But it's a whole collection of rules like that, or rather conventions like that. But I want to specifically talk about the spaces that I've put in here. I've put in 4 spaces, and I've put them in for the purpose of indenting those 2 lines away from the rest of the source code. There's 3 lines that have not been indented. Now you might think, well, that's quite unnecessary. I could just get rid of those spaces like that, and the source code would still be perfectly readable, and I agree. But this is a very, very simple piece of source code. And if you were to try the same caper with a source code of 1,000 lines or more, or even 50 lines, you would quickly end up with a program that was very difficult to navigate and very difficult to read. Just try it. Open up one of the pieces of source code in the later modules or later chapters of this course, one of the ones that's quite long, and take out all the excess indentation and see if you can find your way around in that program. I bet you can't. So we put the spaces in for the purpose of readability. Indentation it's called. Why have I put 4? Well, why not? It doesn't have to be 4. It could be 3. 1, 2, 3. And the same there. It could even be 2 or 1. Whatever you find preferable for you, just so long as it is easy to read. If it's just 1, then that's 1 level of indentation and that's 2 levels of indentation. It's very hard to tell them apart because there's only 1 space separating them. However, when there's 4, like that, that's 1 level of indentation and that's 2 levels of indentation. And it's quite easy to tell them apart. Anyway, those are the essences of whitespace. There are no rules to do with whitespace, just guidelines and recommendations.